be your safari guide here today as we travel through the Harambe Wildlife Reserve. Now, just a few safety reminders before we head out into the reserve. Please remain seated and keep all of those hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the truck at all times. We are going to hang out at the top of this hill for just a few more moments. We'll wait for that final all clear from the warden. But while we're waiting, you can look up above you. You're going to see an animal spotting guide. Hopefully we'll be able to see quite a few of those animals out here today. Maybe not every single one of them, but I'm sure we will definitely see some of them hanging around. Now, once we do get that all clear as well, this first area we're going to enter is called the Little Aturi Forest. A lot of the animals in the forest can be shy, or they may just be really good at camouflaging. So we are going to have to keep our eyes peeled because they may be playing a little bit of some hide and seek with us. We do have our all clear, so we're going to make our way onto the reserve now. I think I can already see one animal hanging out a little bit further up ahead. On the hill that will be on our left-hand side in a few moments, I can see a lighter brown antelope kind of hiding out in between the trees here. This is called a greater kudu. Now, this greater kudu, it does look like it's a female because she doesn't have any horns on her head. Only male greater kudus have horns. And they grow in this really long, really cool spiral shape on their heads, too. I also think I see a bit further up to the left-hand side, there's a darker, more cinnamon-colored antelope. That's called a bongo. The bongos are very shy and reclusive. They've actually earned the nickname the ghosts of the forest because of how rarely they're ever seen out in the wild. They spend most of their time hiding between the trees and the bushes. It looks like another greater kudu, or two more actually hanging out here as well. Now, on the hill to the right-hand side, I did see two okapi. It looks like we can see that one still hanging out over by the bamboo trees. A lot of people do think that the okapi is related to the zebra because it's got those stripes on its legs. However, it's actually the closest living relative to the giraffe. We can tell this because they've got a very similar skull structure. Their heads are kind of shaped the same, but they also both have those very long prehensile tongues. And that just means that their tongues are able to reach out and grab at any food around them, making it a lot easier for them to eat. Kind of like how we use our fingers to reach out and grab at things. Over on our left-hand side here, we can see a black rhino laying down. It does look like a really big rock, but it is a black rhino. Now, that rhino does actually have something in common with the okapi. It also has something prehensile, and that's its prehensile upper lip. So its upper lip is just a little bit more pointed, kind of in a V shape, which again allows it to grab at its food a whole lot easier. Now, as of 2015, there were only about 5,000 black rhinos left in the world. That's because they used to be really heavily poached for their horns, because it was believed that their horns contained medicinal properties inside of them. However, it has since been discovered their horns are just made up of keratin, which is the same thing our fingernails and hair is made of. Plus, with the help of conservation efforts made, we've been able to double that number of black rhinos left in the world. And just before we exit the forest, to the left-hand side there are two really tall black and white birch just behind those bushes. Those are called saddle-billed storks. Those storks can get really tall, up to about 5 feet tall, and their wingspan is about 9 feet wide, which is about the width of the canopy above us on this truck. Now, as we exit the forest, we're now going to enter the Safi River region of the reserve, and watering holes can be very common congregating areas for a few animals. So we'll have to keep our eyes out for any bubbles or ripples in the water, maybe even some darker shadows as well. That could be a sign of some animals lurking beneath the surface. As we do make our way down this hill, in the river on the right-hand side, I can see quite a few pink-backed pelicans hanging out, most of them on the islands in the center here, but I do see a few more a little bit further along. Now, these pelicans, they get their name from the pink color on their back, and that color does get a lot brighter and a lot pinker during mating season, kind of like how we humans blush and our cheeks get pink. They're also colonial nesters, which means they'll nest in pairs of anywhere from 20 to 500 pelicans at a time. And just like many other birds, those pelicans will also migrate during the winter. They'll head down south, but when it is time to return for nesting season, a lot of those pelicans will return to the same exact area that they've nested in before. And in some cases, many pelicans will return to the same exact nest that they've nested in before, which is really cool. Let's move up ahead here, the river along our left-hand side, see if we can find any other animals hanging out down in the water. Well, I do think I see some Nile hippos just down here, actually, kind of just barely hiding out below the bottom. Now, hippos do tend to spend most of their time in and under the water. We can see this one swimming over by the waterfalls there. They can actually hold their breath for several minutes at a time, up to about 8 minutes at a time. Also on our left-hand side, we can see some Nile crocodiles. Nile crocodiles are the largest crocodiles in Africa. They average about 16 feet long and 500 pounds. They're also able to eat of their body weight in just one sitting. Now, they are very, very strong and powerful animals. However, they're also incredibly gentle animals, too, because they will use those strong and powerful jaws that they have to gently pick up their eggs and roll them around in their mouths, making it a lot easier for those eggs to hatch whenever they're ready. Now, the next area we're going to be entering is the largest and my personal favorite part of the reserve. It's going to be the savanna. There's quite a few animals we may be able to see roaming around the savanna. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to stop for every single one of them because they certainly do not stop for us. The animals out here, they are free roaming, which means they can go wherever they want, whenever they want, and that could just include in the middle of the road. Of course, if that happens, we will definitely stop for them. We'll let them pass, and they can certainly take their time because this is their moment. We are just the visitors here. So we'll slowly make our way down to the very bottom of this hill and see if we can take a look at the first few animals hanging out in this part of the reserve. Now, coming up on our right-hand side, looks like we can see some Hartman's Mountain zebras walking around. There's a couple different kinds of zebras out in the wild. These are the Hartman's Mountain zebras, and we know this because of their stripe pattern. You'll notice that the stripes on their hind legs are a little bit wider, just a little bit thicker than the ones on the rest of their body. That's how we can set them apart from other kinds of zebra, like the common or the Grevy's zebra. They've all got those very different and specific stripes on their bodies that help us set them apart from other kinds of zebra. Now again, they are the mountain zebras too, so it is safe to assume they're a little bit more native to those mountainous regions. Because of this, their hooves are actually angled. They're a little bit more pointed to help them better navigate all of that steep and mountainous terrain that they typically have to climb out in their natural habitats. Looks like we'll be able to get a little bit of a better look at a few more coming up on our left-hand side here. Ooh, also back to the left, I can see some sable antelope, the darker brown ones kind of hanging out in the shade of the trees over there. Now, the sable antelope are the emblem of the Harambe Wildlife Reserve, and that's because in a fight or flight, these really long, skinny horns that they have on their heads, they are one of their defense mechanisms, and they help to deter any predators from jumping on their backs and catching them off guard. They're definitely very useful in a fight as well. Let's loop around, make our way a little bit further up along here, see who else we can find hanging out. And of course, we can get one last look at a few of those zebras over there to our right-hand side. But I will say something that's really cool that I love about the zebras is what their stripes are used for. Now, a lot of the animals we saw back in the forest, the okapi, the greater kudu, and the bongos, their stripes are used to help them blend into their environments. A lot of their stripes are a little bit more jagged, not really consistent at all, and that's because they're supposed to help not only blend in with any shadows that come through the tree branches, but also some of those branches on the bushes and trees themselves. Now, a zebra's stripes are actually supposed to help them blend in with one another, not with the environment. Because if there's a whole group of zebra all together out in the wild, they kind of just look like a really big blur. Their stripes kind of blend in with one another. So it's really hard for any predators to single them out and hunt them down. So they do camouflage, not necessarily into their environment, but with one another. And there's quite a few more animals a little bit further up ahead. It looks like coming up on our left-hand side, we can see these really tiny antelope with the white bellies and the light brown backs. These are called springbok. Now, I love the springbok. I think they're really cute and really fun. They get their name from a springing motion they do called pronking. And when they pronk, they can get about 6 feet high in the air and 13 feet forward, which does mean they could essentially jump straight through this truck if they wanted to. Now, quite a few animals just up on our right-hand side as we make this turn. Not only can we see quite a few Maasai giraffe, but there's also quite a few wildebeest roaming around too. And I will say this is actually really, really neat. I'm going to tell you there's 3 giraffe laying down right now. This is kind of rare. It's really uncommon to see giraffe laying down out in the wild because they've got really large bodies and some really long, lengthy legs. So it is a little bit more awkward for them to stand back up once they are laying down, and it definitely makes them a little bit more vulnerable to any predators in the area. Although I will say here on the reserve, they know they're safe. They are very comfortable here, so it's a bit more common to see them laying down from time to time, but still pretty rare. So it's really cool that not only can we see one laying down, but all 3 of them. Now that's really neat to see. Now, of course, when they are fully standing, they are the tallest animals on land. They can stand anywhere from 16 to 20 feet tall when they're fully grown. We can also get a good look at some of these wildebeest that were roaming around here as well. Wildebeest is the Dutch Afrikaans word for wild beast, and they're very large herd members. They're incredibly social animals, so it is much more common to see quite a few of them hanging out in those groups together. way past all of these broken down trees here. I will say this could be a sign that we're coming a little bit closer to seeing some of the bulldozers of the savannah. And by bulldozers, I do mean hopefully as we keep moving forward, we'll be able to find some African elephants nearby. Now, elephants are often referred to as the bulldozers of the savannah because they use their very large tusks and their trunks to knock down any of those older trees that really don't need to be there and are kind of in the way. And it does look like over there on the right, we do see one hanging out. Now, they definitely need as much room as possible when they are migrating those much further distances across the savannah. So again, you'll see them knocking down those trees that don't need to be there. Now, their trunks that they have are also considered prehensile. So yet again, just like how we use our fingers, elephants will use their trunks to grab at things, whether they want to pick up some food or maybe even just touch one another to get to know each other. Or of course, most importantly, they use their trunks to help them drink water, kind of like how we use a straw. An elephant will use its trunk. And they can hold about 5 gallons of water in the trunk too. So they'll just suck that water up, bring it up to their mouths, and dump it inside their mouths. Definitely makes it a lot easier to eat and drink, especially considering they are such large animals with their mouths so high up off the ground. And of course, being large animals, they also have those really, really large ears on their heads as well. And it's really common to see elephants flapping their ears quite a bit. Now, they do this not because they're trying to fly away like Dumbo. They're actually just trying to cool down their bodies. Each ear weighs about 100 pounds, and there are many blood vessels in the ears too. So when they flap them and get a really nice air current flowing, plus with the help of those blood vessels releasing heat, they can lower their body temperature by about 15 degrees. It's a very good cooling mechanism for them to have, especially considering they do tend to live in those much warmer environments, like the savannah or even the desert as well. Now we'll make our way just under this bridge here. Oh, it also does look like over towards the right-hand side as we pass under the bridge, there are some elephant tusk marks and all of the red clay just along the wall here. Elephants will use their tusks to scrape away at the clay, making it a lot easier for them to eat. And they do tend to eat from the clay quite a bit. There's a lot of good minerals in it for the elephants, so it is very, very healthy for them. Though, unfortunately, elephants have often been poached for those ivory tusks. And because of this poaching, they're typically driven out of their habitats and driven just a little bit closer to farmland. But with the help of Disney's Conservation Fund, scientists have discovered that elephants are actually afraid of bees. So farmers will build beehives around their land, not only to protect their crops, but also to keep the elephants at a very safe distance and out of harm's way. It is just one of the many examples of humans and animals learning to live in harmony with one another without having to resort to those more harmful tactics like poaching. Now, it does look like there's quite a few more over here on our left-hand side that we can see as opposed to the one in the first yard. Elephants are very, very social animals. However, the males do tend to go off on their own once they're about teenagers. And they either remain alone or form very loose bachelor herds that they stay in for the rest of their lives. While the females will remain in these larger herds, especially if there are little ones. I do see a little baby kind of hiding out below mama there. I'll go slowly so everyone can get a brief glimpse at her, it looks like. I think we can see one last look just in this opening here past the rock. Yeah, just hanging out below mama. Of course, a very good sign that these are some females. They're very maternal animals. They want to make sure they keep a really close and watchful eye on their young ones until they are a little bit older, a little bit more independent, and able to do some more things on their own. And speaking of those little ones, an elephant's gestation period is actually incredibly long, one of the longest, up to about 22 months. That's almost 2 whole years of them being pregnant. As you do move along here, it looks like there is a little island, and hanging out on this little island, a whole flamboyance of greater flamingos. Greater flamingos are the largest flamingos, but the shade of pink that we see here, it is going to be the darkest shade of pink that they get. It takes about 2 years for them to get this color, and they do get it from their diet. They eat a brine shrimp that's full of a protein called beta-carotene. And the more they eat that protein, the pinker their feathers will get over those first few years of their lives. A lot of birds will also migrate south for the winter time in order to stay warm, but flamingos actually won't do this. Instead, they develop quite a few more feathers on their bodies to help insulate them. Kind of like how we wear those really big puffy coats that have all the feathers inside of them. It's the same kind of concept. But let's cross on over into the eastern half of the savannah here. It does look like over on the left-hand side, not only is there a really large mud wallow in the center of the field, but behind that mud wallow, I can see quite a few white rhinos laying around. It's really common to find white rhinos in areas that have these really large mud pits because they have very sensitive skin. So you'll see them rolling around in the mud and covering their bodies in it, so that the mud not only acts as a natural sunblock, but also as a little bit of a bug repellent. It kind of helps to keep the bugs off of their skin, especially from biting at their skin and potentially giving them any sort of parasites too. I will say something I love about the white rhinos that I think is really cool. They actually don't get their name from the color of their skin. They're not exactly white. They're just kind of a light shade of gray. Instead, they get their name from the Dutch Afrikaans word wijd, which means wide, and it refers to the very wide upper lip that they have. Remember, all the way back in the forest, we did see the black rhino, and I mentioned it had more of that pointed and V-shaped upper lip. That's going to be one of the main differences between those two kinds of rhinos. Now real quick, over on our left-hand side, laying out in the middle of the hill, I can see some cheetahs. It looks like their tails are kind of flicking around a little bit up there too. Now cheetahs are the fastest animals on land. They can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just about 3 seconds. However, they are only built for speed. They're not built for strength, so they can only maintain that 60 miles per hour for a couple hundred yards. And when you're going that fast, it actually is not very far. So they more so attack their prey in quick sprints as opposed to any sort of long distance running. They just prowl around the area, wait until their prey gets close enough to them, and then they do a very quick sneak attack. They just kind of pounce on them really fast. Cheetahs also have these really long black marks below their eyes. It kind of looks like teardrop stains running down their faces, as if they had a whole bunch of makeup on and just cried it off. Well, that's because they are daytime hunters, and they don't want the sun reflecting off of their bright golden fur back into their eyes. It makes it a little bit harder for them to see when they're trying to hunt. So those black marks help to deflect the sunlight. Kind of like how athletes will put black paint under their eyes whenever they're playing any sort of sport out in the daylight too. Now we'll loop around a little bit further up ahead, see if we can find any other animals hanging out nearby here. No, actually I do think I saw one over on the right-hand side. I'm going to loop around and see if we can get a bit of a better view of it. It looked like on the other side of that truck sitting there, I think I saw an ostrich walking around. I hope we can get another look. Now ostriches, they are the largest birds, however they cannot fly. Instead, they just use their wings to help them balance and change directions while they run. And they do tend to run quite a bit. They're actually the fastest animal just on 2 legs. They can even get up to about 40 miles per hour when they run. I will say though, before we get down back to that truck, hopefully another look at the ostrich, over on our left here, just behind the really tall tree in the center, there are some warthogs laying down. Warthogs are the largest burrowing animals. However, they're really not all that picky about their homes, and they're also quite resourceful. So you'll often see them either reusing burrows made by other animals in the past, or they just find natural holes in the ground and use them as their burrows. Again, not super picky whatsoever when they do find homes. Yeah, it does look like we can get a good look at that ostrich over here to the right-hand side, just behind that tree stump. Now, it does look like that ostrich is a female because of the color of her feathers. Female ostriches have a much lighter color to them, kind of a light gray, light brown, while male ostriches do look a whole lot darker. They're essentially black with just a little bit of some white sprinkled in around the edges of their wings. You can get one last brief glimpse at the warthogs over to the left as well. I will also say it's really common to see warthogs backing into their burrows quite a bit because they've got those really sharp tusks on their faces, and they want to make sure that the tusks are facing outwards so that no other animal tries to bother them when they're in their home. It makes it a little bit of a defense for them. But let's move forward and finally exit the savanna here. It does look like we're coming up close to the edge of the reserve as we're about to pass the warden's post up ahead. Although I will say, before we leave completely, I think I saw something hanging out on the other side of this hill. We'll see if we can get a look. Unless I'm just losing my mind and there was actually nothing over there. No, yeah, it does look like over on the other side of this hill we can see some of the warden's Nigerian dwarf goats. The warden will keep these goats around because they produce a very sweet milk, and that milk is used to create other dairy products like cheese and butter to help sustain the village nearby. That way the villagers are just a little bit less reliant on the other natural wildlife in the area. Now you may have also noticed that yellow triangle-shaped box in the center of the post there as well. Maybe wondering what that was. Well, that was actually just one of those beehives that I mentioned all the way back by the elephants. And it is kind of a win-win situation because not only does that beehive provide a little bit of protection, it also provides honey for the village as well. So there's a lot of that self-sustainability going on and much less reliance on those more natural wildlife resources. Now, of course, we have talked about conservation just a little bit throughout our safari here today. However, our conservation efforts definitely do not have to end here. As I'm sure some of you have been taking pictures and videos of the animals that we've been seeing on your cell phones. Well, those bones contain a mineral inside of them called coltan. And coltan mining can be a really big habitat destroyer. Something that we can do to help protect those habitats as well as all of the animals inside them is by taking our old phones and donating them to any electronics store or charitable drive that knows how to properly recycle the coltan. That way there is just a little bit less of that mining and habitat destruction and a bit more of the habitat protection that we would rather see. But unfortunately, this does bring us to the end of our time here on the Harambe Wildlife Reserve, and I would just like to say asante sana to you all. Thank you for joining us here on Kilimanjaro Safaris. Once again, my name is Brenna, and I hope you had a great time seeing all of the animals out here today. Of course, if you didn't get enough of them, feel free to come